Our lives are worthless. We go from one day to the next, always searching for food. We're filled with sadness. There's no peace in my life.
I feel sad when someone walks through here and sees how we live. And how they're hiding us from the foreigners who come here, as if we didn't exist.
The doctor prescribes medicine and you don't have money to buy it, and your child might be very sick in the night. You just watch the child dying and you don't have money to do anything about it.
Being poor is living in a shack. And when it gets cold, you close the doors and cover yourself up. But the ice-cold wind continues to hit your body.
The world looks very different when viewed through the eyes of a poor person.
Poor workers like us don't get the rights we deserve. Our boss has us do work and then doesn't pay us. I can hardly feed myself. Inflation is so high now. How can I support a family?
From India to Brazil to Bosnia to Uganda and Mali. They speak in different languages, but often about the same things. Powerlessness and an inability to participate in decisions that affect their lives, living with vulnerability and risk, and a lack of real opportunity. In this edition of Global Links, we will explore some of the causes and solutions to poverty. And we will hear from the true poverty experts, the poor people themselves.
Escolhe ser honesto ou se escolhe ser.
Porque não é fácil criar 7 filhos sozinho.
Eu vou estipular a cola os filhos.
Eu criei meus filhos com força, com garra, com dignidade, sem roubar.
My name is Munni. I started working here in 1988. I work from 5 in the morning to 9 at night. Some days, my hands ache so much that I only earn 40 rupees. I buy food for my kids since my husband doesn't provide for them.
Every poor person's experience is unique, but all over the world, poor people, like Munni, share common problems. Chief among them, insecurity, lack of opportunity, and powerlessness.
What can I do? I'm a poor woman. If I don't work, how do we live? I don't have a government job. If we stay in our village, we can't earn a living. In our village, there's only one crop each year.
Among the poor, women and children are especially at risk. While she works, Munni must also take care of her 3 children.
My husband says I am black and ugly, so he wants to marry someone with lighter skin. That's exactly what he says. He's working in a bicycle garage. He doesn't ask about the kids. I will look after my children, whether or not anyone cares about them. I'll see to it that they grow up. Taking care of my kids is what makes me happy.
Like the other women working in this outdoor brick factory in Bihar, India, Muni has little power or control over her life, or opportunity to change it. Instead, she places her hope in her children.
I worry only about my children. If they want to study until they graduate, where will they get the money to live? I'll do whatever I can to get them an education.
Yet, Muni's hopes may be unfulfilled. Many of the children of seasonal workers, including hers, do not attend school, and thus remain locked in a cycle of little opportunity. Poor migrant workers like Muni are especially vulnerable to factors beyond their control. Their future is uncertain, and their present insecure. A fierce storm erupts, heralding the coming monsoon. The rains mean there will be no more work until next season. The following morning, the camp is deserted. Muni, her children, and hundreds of other seasonal workers have been forced to move on to find other ways to survive. The problems faced by poor people like Muni are complex and interlinked, making it difficult to escape the hold of poverty. How can poor people's lives be made more secure? How can they gain more power and control over their lives? And how can they get access to new opportunities?
Cheguei em 73.
I arrived here in 1973. I worked as a maid in private homes and later got a job with a textile company. I found a boyfriend and married him and left my job. I was married 7 years when my husband died.
Bom dia.
At 45, Angelina Nunes de Oliveira is the mother of 7. Her oldest son is 26, and she has a 5-year-old grandson.
It was a struggle to raise my kids, especially hearing your child say, "Mom, I need clothes. I want a pair of shoes. I want food." And you must turn around and say, "There is none."
Angelina lives in the Brazilian favela of Sacadura Cabral, within sight of the gleaming towers of downtown Sao Paulo, South America's largest city. Yet, proximity to this global hub of communications, business, and technology has little benefit or meaning to her. In fact, it sometimes simply makes her problems worse.
Here in the slum, there are a lot of drugs. There always have been, and we have nothing against it. Because those who use drugs the most are not the people who live in the slum, but those who come from the outside looking for them.
Angelina's eldest son, Fabio.
You can either choose to be honest or to be a bandit. You are either a worker or a robber. Since there are drugs right around the corner, it is easy to choose. You see it. It's right there.
I lost my daughter. She was raped and murdered when she was 4 years and 8 months. It was a great shock. I thought I would go mad, that I would disappear. I wanted to vanish. But then I would look at my kids and think of them. I would think how my children needed me. Thank God the church gave me a lot of strength and I overcame all of this. I suffered a lot, but I stuck with God and He gave me the strength to overcome and continue raising my other kids.
Another source of strength and support for Angelina has been her community of neighbors and friends.
O povo dentro da favela, eles acabam um ajudando o outro.
People who live in the slum help each other. If you need anything, they help you. If you don't have a telephone, they let you use theirs, or will give you messages. One helps the other. In my opinion, the government is responsible for poverty. They're not interested in improving living conditions. There's even a little song that goes, "The rich climb up and the poor go down."
Fabio's distrust of the government is typical of residents of favelas like Sacadura Cabral, where poor people have learned they must first organize to gain a voice and then fight long and hard to get officials to respond to their needs.
Since 1980, I have been active in neighborhood meetings and committees. Many people have given up participating, but I haven't.
Darzino Carlos de Oliveira is president of Angelina's Neighborhood Association.
Tempo atrás, ainda não era nem associação, era uma comissão de moradores com reivindicações e nós.
When we started a while back, this wasn't even an association.
Dos primeiros exemplos que deu certo.
We were just a committee that made lists and requests. Our first victory was getting action on our request to have sewers put in on Luis de Camões Street back in 1990.
A more recent victory in their negotiations with government came with the start of construction of permanent housing for residents of Sacadura Cabral.
My house will be beautiful. You've been to where I live. It's a shack.
Angelina's neighbor, Hilda Silva.
We will be out of the floods, away from the rats and cockroaches. You know what it's like. And we'll have a pretty new house, like those on the other side. I think all the residents of Sacadura will be happy in their pretty houses, no matter how small they may be. There are the poor, and there are the miserable. We are the poor. But we are humble poor who are fighting to rise, and tomorrow we will be citizens with an address. And we'll be able to write letters to any part of the world. We'll have a real address with a zip code of our street. So I don't consider myself poor, only half poor.
Education is another area where the government has responded to the neighborhood association's demands.
This project behind me is the Citizen Child Project, which provides kids with school and home activities to keep them off the streets. It's a preventative program.
Here in Sacadura Cabral, we work with around 350 to 400 children. Their greatest interest is in sports, but computers and capoeira are also popular.
The Citizen Child Project has helped a lot. I had a son who was a rebel. He wanted me to pay for capoeira lessons, but I couldn't afford it. When the project started, he was able to take up capoeira, and he changed a lot.
Despite the considerable odds against her, Angelina's resilient spirit and reliance on community involvement have taken her to a place of hope and hard-earned pride.
It's not easy to raise 7 children alone. It's not easy. If this is pride, then I am a proud, poor person. I raised my kids with strength, courage, dignity, without stealing, without letting them steal, teaching them what life is about. Being poor is all this.
Further south in Brazil, in the city of Porto Alegre, the government has initiated a bold citywide experiment to formally include community participation in its budget decisions. And citizens like Neusa and Tunes are responding.
I'm trying to clear the street to pave it over so that people don't fall over here. It's so dangerous, but just imagine if it was paved over. But for now, lots of children and grown-ups have accidents here.
Neusa has lived in the favela of Araiazeca for 18 years. It has no running water, no electricity, and no sewage system.
Water on top of water. The sooner the village is paved, the better. That is what we want the most.
For decades, the city of Porto Alegre was known for widespread corruption among its officials. Poor people in Porto Alegre never had a say in where public money would be spent. But that was before the city came up with a plan to give its citizens, even the poorest ones, a voice in making such decisions through the Orçamento Participativo, the participative budget. Every year, meetings like this, complete with entertainment, are held in different areas of the city to call to account the city's administrators and to decide how next year's budget will be spent. Everyone has the right to put their own projects forward in a system that has become an extraordinary and popular experiment in direct democracy. One of the architects of this experiment was former Mayor Tarso Genro.
E, portanto, o cidadão deixa de ser cidadão formal. Cidadão que demanda apenas juridicamente.
The citizen is no longer just a formal citizen who won't interact with the state in the political sphere, votes and goes home. The citizen takes part in the government. It makes public demands in public meetings, which then set out the priorities to be discussed with other areas of the city.
Fazem prioridades, são discutidas, portanto, em plenárias populares que fazem prioridades de outras regiões da cidade.
The effect has been to switch spending from the rich areas of the city to the poor, like here in Villa Planetario. Residents say this used to be a rocky slope, which turned into an impossible mudslide whenever it rained, dividing the community in half. All budget projects are decided on a system of priorities depending on need. This year, Neusa thinks it ought to be her community's turn to get some improvements, and she's off to a regional meeting to press their case, a model citizen according to the system's architect.
Está na base do orçamento participativo a dissolução.
We have seen the breaking down of the bureaucratic barriers between the state and the common citizen, and the possibility of voluntary participation of the citizen in the management of public business. Alongside their political representatives, it is a chance for the citizen to participate.
Each year in Porto Alegre, tens of thousands of people have been involved for meetings such as this in the participative budget. They have put forward a multitude of plans to improve their own neighborhoods.
Our area needs help. Our project is ready. We mustn't waste time. Because of limited resources, not all of these demands will be met. But
win or lose, people like Neusa and Tunis know that their voices have been heard and that the city officials will have to explain how choices were made.
I have children. I have to feed them. If they fall ill, how can I take care of them if there is no work?
Poor people like Parmila Das say they need work, but they also need affordable health care. With the body often their only asset, illness is a common source of insecurity for the poor.
When we get sick, it's a big loss for us.
The poor say they want doctors and medicines that they can trust and afford, but that they often do not find them at government hospitals.
This is New Gardiner Government Hospital, which is providing free healthcare services to 6 slums in which we are working.
Arpin Singh heads the Indian non-governmental organization Nidan, which means solution.
But the poor people with whom we work do not prefer to come here because they feel that the service they provide is of inferior quality and there is lack of sensitivity to the needs of the poor people. And so we as volunteer organization are working as a bridge between the poor and the government hospital.
The government hospital is located literally adjacent to one of the many slums in downtown Patna, the capital of Bihar. But few slum dwellers come here.
The hospital might be next door, but we have to stand in line like ordinary beggars. Even after we wait in line, they don't give us medicine properly. If they do prescribe us medicine, they tell us to get it from somewhere else. If there is an emergency, how can we stand in line to wait for a doctor?
In Brazil, many favela residents say they face much the same treatment.
For me, being poor means we are nobody because we're not even considered to be human. We go to the hospital, face a huge line, and when the doctor finally does see us, he won't even look us in the face.
By contrast, these healthcare workers not only look their patients in the face, they often know them by name. Maria de Silva is one of thousands of local Brazilian women who have been trained under a new government-community partnership for healthcare. These so-called barefoot doctors visit poor families door to door, giving medical advice on treating and preventing illness. The government program inspires trust between residents and healthcare workers because these barefoot doctors often come from the communities they serve. In addition, it provides training and employment for local women. Gaining the trust of poor people will require changes in many government-provided services, particularly the police, whom the poor often view more as persecutors than protectors.
As I went out, a policeman came out of the alley and told me to put my hands on my head, and then hit me in the face. I screamed for my mother and said I lived here, and they took off running.
What really frightens me is the police, because they're not selective about who they bother. They just arrive and they don't care who you are.
And for poor women, the problem is compounded by the fact that most police officers are men. Here in Brazil, they are pioneering an innovative solution, female police stations that focus exclusively on crimes against women, including rape and domestic violence.
Women were really ashamed to go to the police, who are usually men, and explain that they were beaten by their husbands or were raped. So I believe that the women's police stations were created for this reason, so people could open up and not be afraid to explain their real problem.
Although domestic violence affects all classes, poor victims are more likely to require state services.
A poor person, a poor woman, who doesn't have the financial means to look for a private doctor, a private lawyer, a private therapist, what is she to do? She will look to the public services, among them the police. We of the women's police refer her to the health department, to the legal department, for her to have all the services that a rich person would have to pay for.
Non-governmental organizations can also play an important role in helping the poor deal with conflict and insecurity.
I came here because of my husband's violence. We were married for 20 years.
Elma Ganic is a client at the Medica Center for Therapy for Women, a Bosnian non-governmental organization that provides assistance to women and their children who have been traumatized by violence.
When we take into account the poverty to which the entire Bosnian society is subjected, it is clear that most people are under constant stress. We all lost patience in this war. We all react rashly, and this has an impact on families. Communication has been impaired, and this increases aggression and domestic violence.
I had to leave everything. I was forced to, because I was beaten a lot. He beat me up once so badly that my lips split, and I had to get stitches.
The war in Bosnia has been over since 1995, but the poverty, social disruption, and psychological trauma that it left behind have devastated the entire society.
So many were killed. Children, my brothers were killed, and many were injured. My relatives as well. There was a lot of trouble back and forth, and in the end, it was all for nothing. I got no help. Before the war, I was able to afford everything, as if I had worked in Germany for 50 years. Now I can't even breathe, not even stir. Before, I could entertain 100 guests, and now, not even one.
At 65, Ismail Zafo says the elderly are the forgotten poor.
Who cares if you are alive or not? I was good enough to fight in the war, and I was injured. I spent half my time in the army, and the other half in the civil defense. They burdened me like a mule. Now it doesn't amount to anything.
Like many newly impoverished Bosnians, Ismail Zafo yearns for the security of life before the war.
I lived like a lord before the war. A man in America wasn't my equal. And now, nobody cares. Absolutely nobody. Whether you live or die.
The psychological dimensions of poverty, isolation, shame, humiliation, and feelings of helplessness are sometimes just as significant as a lack of material assets.
My son was killed. It was the war. At the end of the war, I went to the government office to ask them to give me a shelter. They put me up here.
75-year-old Deza Radinovia still lives in this refugee camp just outside Sarajevo. Deza is afraid to return to her home, which is now occupied by other refugees who fled a brutal wartime massacre.
I cannot return there alone. I cannot go there alone because it was so close to the front line. I lived there, and I cannot go back. Who is there to feel sorry for you? Who do I have here? Who do I have to feel sorry for me? Wherever you turn, no one wants to listen to you at all. To whom should I complain? Who do I have here? Who? Nobody.
Insecurity also means precarious livelihoods, like those of seasonal workers forced to migrate each year. Hejiban Ahir of Gujarat, India, used to be one of them.
If there was no work here, we went to Kathiawar to earn a livelihood. If you have somewhere to stay but nothing to eat, what are you supposed to do? I felt homesick. I would have liked to return home, but there was no alternative.
That was before Ahir discovered a way that she could make a living using her traditional sewing skills with the help of the Self-Employed Women's Association, or SEWA, which connected her to a market for her craft.
We found that women traditionally used to wear, embroidered clothes, and when we tried to find out whether they were using this skill for economic purposes, and they said they had never used it before for commercial purposes. We procured them and market tested through SEWA's urban craft cooperatives, and we got very good market response.
Initially, SEWA struggled to convince Ahir to market her embroidery.
At first, I didn't trust them. I didn't think they would pay us for the embroidery. I didn't think I would see any money. But one woman was very persuasive and assured us that we would be paid for our work at home. Now our only difficulty is collecting and delivering the work.
With the income from her embroidery, Ahir and her family have some measure of security for the first time in their lives. They've been able to take out a loan for their home and no longer migrate each year in search of work. Fourteen-year-old Emmanuel Kutumba of Uganda grew up without the opportunity to get a basic education. When he was just 8, both of Emmanuel's parents died of AIDS, an all too familiar story throughout much of Africa. In Uganda, 11% of the children under 15 are orphans, and 2/3 of them have lost their parents to AIDS. Emmanuel and his brothers, Stephen and Alex, along with their older sister, Rita, managed to stay together in their half-finished family home rather than be raised by strangers. Emmanuel decided to work full-time so that his sister could finish primary school. His decision shows that even African children understand the value of education and are willing to fight for it.
I really wanted to go to school, but the money I made just wasn't enough for my school as well. I said to myself, when our sister finishes school, she'll help us go to school.
Emmanuel's story is not unusual in Uganda, where half of the country's children could not afford school. But in 1997, the government changed its policy, entitling up to 4 children in every family to free public education. The new policy has transformed the lives of Emmanuel and his siblings. He and his brothers, Stephen and Alex, are now back in primary school. For the first time, because of the new policy of Universal Primary Education, or UPE, they are hopeful about the future.
When UPE came, we were all able to go back to school. Now that I'm in school, I feel happy.
Ugandan government officials are aware that trying to provide an education for all children means some loss in quality. But they believe that striving for education accessible to all is crucial to the economic development of their nation.
This is a powerful tool against poverty, because when people are educated, they have a skill that will enable them to participate in the growing economy.
As in Uganda, many governments are attempting to improve the quality of such services as education and to make them universally accessible to poor people. Their success in reaching the poor often depends on innovative partnerships with poor people's organizations, non-governmental organizations, and the private sector.
The government needs to recognize the importance of that flexibility.
Ella Bhatt is the founder of SEWA, a non-governmental organization which helps Indian women gain employment and self-reliance by connecting them to the formal economy.
When we talk of women in India, then who are the women of India? 80% of women in India are rural, poor, illiterate, and economically very active. Their main problem was the problem of invisibility. Their work was not recorded, and their contribution to the national income not recorded, and therefore they did not make an integral part of the planning process at the national level.
Like SEWA, Nidan, another Indian non-governmental organization, works to expand economic opportunities for urban women slum dwellers.
What we do here is to make groups of women, and within these groups, empower them and train them so that they can become more self-aware and eventually break their silence.
Nidan also connects poor women to formal lines of credit. Sheila Devi lives in this slum in the center of Patna. 3 years ago, with the help of Nidan, she and a group of other women were able to obtain a small loan to create a shop in the back of Devi's home.
I do business in food grains, spices, and also biscuits.
The microloan, which may never have happened without Nidan's help, came from India's second largest bank, the Bank of Baroda. B. Lal, chief manager of the Patna branch, explains
that the cost of servicing these accounts is very less, in the sense that we are associated with the NGO Nidan, who are helping us in identification of the prospective borrowers. At the same time, they are also helping us in making recovery on due dates.
Poor women like Sheila Devi are eminently bankable, says Lal's colleague Subhas Chandra.
You see, the maxim, poor is bankable, is nowhere exhibited better than the self-help group schemes. Because one, bankable is in the sense that poor are honest people. They don't know how to cheat. Secondly, that bankable means even the financing, the microcredit, is a viable scheme for financing the poor people because they come up with the interest. It's not that it's just a mere financing on zero interest. They also pay interest and they pay it well. The repayment schedules have been adhered to.
Now Devi is going back to the bank to ask for another, larger loan to expand her business. And prospects look good.
पैसा ले जाते पूंजी में लगाते हैं बिजनेस में लगाते हैं करना चाहते हैं कि जे
When I get the loan money,
चार मरते हो जाएगा हम लोग के लिए
I use it to expand the business.
कि जे और ये हुए पैसा कि जे हम लोग का
We make a profit from the money that goes into the business.
आगे बढ़ाए और
I want to use this money to make things better for my children and my business and in building my house.
In addition to making credit more widely available, education and training are key to supporting poor people's market activities. These women who sell fruits, vegetables, fish, and textiles at the Songtanaba market in Mali are illiterate. Their lack of basic knowledge was causing them to lose money.
We didn't know how to read a scale. And so people would come and tell us we were buying a certain weight of fish, but all the time we were being cheated. We were being robbed.
To help these women boost their livelihoods, the government joined forces with local women's organizations to launch a training program in basic sales and management skills.
On a alphabétisé les vendeuses de poissons du marché d'Ibida qui avaient des problèmes à l'achat.
The women in the markets had problems with buying. We taught them how to read and use scales.
Using pictures, stories, and role-playing, the women learned that selling requires more than just a product. It requires salesmanship and presentation skills.
We learn from the training that we have to be clean and organized.
If you want to sell, you have to do it with a happy heart and a smile.
The training has led to better profits for these women. They are no longer selling at a loss, and they draw more customers with attractive displays and friendly service. Another essential step in creating assets and opportunity for the poor is to help them connect to markets and the rest of the newly globalized world. In part, this means creating vehicles they can use to cross the so-called digital divide. A revolution in information technology is rapidly transforming our modern world and redefining poverty. More and more, how much you know is at least as important as how much you own. Access to information is crucial for poor people to have a voice and to participate fully in decisions that affect their lives.
O acesso à tecnologia.
Access to technology and information is as important as the right to education, because in today's world, if you don't have access to technology, you are excluded.
Eloise de Campos works with Brazil's CDI, the Committee for Democracy and Information Technology. CDI was founded in 1995 to help poor people gain access to information. Working closely with state institutions, community groups, and private corporations, CDI sets up computer and citizenship schools in the poorest slums.
CDI never works alone. It always works in partnership with the communities. Thus, while partnering with companies and the government, it does not direct the operation of the schools for citizenship and information technology.
CDI supplies donated software and computer equipment and technical assistance. It also trains teachers like 15-year-old William Fernandez.
Well, I'm William, a teacher here, and I study at José de Alencar. I'm in the 5th grade. I should be in the 7th grade, but there was no room in the class. So I went back 2 years to the 5th grade in order to not go without studying. I'm teaching them to create questions for an online interview with the governor of Rio de Janeiro.
Tipo uma entrevista assim com o governador do estado do Rio de Janeiro. Sempre achei super interessante, sempre tive essa vontade de aprender.
I always wanted to learn computer science.
Tudo ok.
Also, with the arrival of the internet, it's a relief for us here to work with people from outside. It's good because without leaving your own home, you can travel.
E é bom que você viaja. Dentro de casa você está viajando.
Not having access to technology makes it more difficult to have access to the job market. So CDI gives them a tool to acquire skills and thus realize their potential.
People say that to be a slum dweller is to create a disturbance on the buses, to be immoral, a deadbeat, things like this, you know? For me, being a favelado is a source of pride. Because I'm none of that.
Como é que você está numerando, professora?
Ai! Eu vou olhar pra trás pra ver a Vivi. Ai!
Poverty has two different definitions. Poverty of information is one kind of poverty. Poverty of materials is another kind of poverty.
Sugata Mitra heads research efforts at NIIT, a fast-growing Indian high-tech company. Mitra's passion is computer-based education, specifically aimed at poor people.
Removing what is increasingly being called the digital divide is an important issue, which means that everyone must have access. The good news is that the cost of access is already low and is continuously spiraling downwards.
Mitra recently launched an experiment called the Hole in the Wall. He took a high-speed computer connected to the internet and embedded it in a concrete wall separating his firm's New Delhi headquarters from the slum right next to it. Then he watched who began to use it.
The slum has about 80 children in all sorts of age groups, of whom about 65 of them are between the ages of 6 and 13. And those are the kids who came there.
What Mitra discovered was that, given access and opportunity, the children, most of whom had little education, could quickly teach themselves the rudiments of computer literacy.
Well, I watched for a while, and when they asked what it was, I told them, I don't know. So when they said, can we touch it? I said, it's on your side of the wall. So the rules say whatever is on their side of the wall they can touch. So they touched it. And in about 5 minutes, they figured out that if they move their finger on the touchpad, the cursor moves. In another 15 minutes, they find out what a click is. And by the end of the day, they were browsing.
I learned it on my own. Some kids used to play with it, and I would watch them intentionally, so I learned it too. I like to play. It opens at 6 a.m., and after that till 9 p.m. we keep playing on it. All the kids near my house play with it.
It was a spiral of self-instruction, if I can put it that way. One child makes an accidental discovery. 3 children come and repeat that, saying, oh, that's cool. If 3 children repeat the same things, they make 3 other accidental discoveries. So that within the end of 2 weeks, they've got about as much instruction in their heads as they would have got in a classroom. The children are better at it, they always find the answers, and they reinvent the subject. They reinvent even the terms, because nobody taught them the words. So they don't call a cursor, they call it a sui, which is Hindi for needle. And they don't call the hourglass symbol because they've never seen an hourglass before. They call it the damaru, which is Shiva's drum, and it does look a bit like that.
But accessing information is not just child's play. It involves a host of issues of importance to the poor, from education to the environment, and from healthcare to human rights. The spread of information technology is changing societies around the world, and the implications for poor people are profound.
गरीब आदमी नहीं खटेंगे तो कहाँ खाएंगे?
Devido à montanha, já me aconteceu.
We have heard voices of pain, passion, and dignity from around the world. They tell us that poor people struggle to survive despite overwhelming obstacles, and that they hunger for more than just food, but for security, opportunity, and a voice in decisions that affect their lives, a reality that decision makers and governments often ignore.
In my opinion, there is no government in Bihar.
Dr. Dinesh Sarangi is a unique politician in Bihar, India.
The government machinery is totally defunct everywhere, a mess.
One reason Dr. Sarangi cites is record-breaking corruption.
The least I say about corruption in Bihar is better. It is already in the Guinness Book of World Records.
Like many of his constituents, Dr. Sarangi believes that a new form of decision-making is required to combat poverty in India.
Unless the villagers are empowered, unless they are given power to decide their destiny, so long as this centralized system is there, definitely they are not going to get justice.
We have seen the role of the state in providing basic services like education for all and in innovating to be more responsive to the needs of poor women and men.
We need to make the government realize that people are a resource. Particularly poor people are our strength. They are not expenditure. They do not want subsidies. What they want is opportunities, more and more opportunities.
We've also seen the role of non-governmental organizations in empowering poor people and linking them to markets and economic opportunities.
The poor could be wonderful for the information business because in the information business, how much material you have may not always be the determining factor of what you can contribute.
We have seen the importance of poor people's own membership organizations and partnerships with government to enable them to participate in decision-making that impacts their lives.
Graças a Deus, Santo André,
Thank God we now have some access to City Hall, where I volunteer as a counselor. But a little while back, the poor would come there and would not be let in.
But many problems cannot be solved at the local level, from war and political instability to environmental and economic shocks. National, regional, and global policies are often needed to alleviate poverty. What we have learned is that these solutions must take into account the realities of poor people. The rest of the world can learn from the poor. Despite their wide-ranging problems, they have both the capacity and the right to offer solutions. And they have voices that deserve to be heard. Listen to the voices of the poor.
We want housing.
We don't want anything for free. We want to work and pay for it, so that one day we have the title to the land and say, "This is mine. I worked and paid for it."
What else can a man ask for? You need enough to eat and drink. You need a good house to live in.
We can't go without food, because food keeps the body. But our soul needs to be nourished too. I was born poor, and I'm still poor. That's all. But I'm not ashamed. I fight to survive, and am ashamed of nothing. Wherever I go, wherever I am never ashamed, because what really matters is our dignity. That's all. And fighting to have a better life.